Hello, welcome to another episode, Unemployed AF Dad. My name is Adam.
And I'm Leslie.
Thank you guys so much for listening. First of all, wanted to go back to last week's episode, our last episode, and just again thank Matt Gardner for joining us, our first guest. So interesting, fascinating to talk to him, and just really appreciate him being on the show. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to the episode we did with Matt Gardner. He's a recovery coach, among other things, and really just a fascinating story.
Yeah, it was really cool getting to talk to him and getting to know him.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks again, Matt. Today's episode, well, this past weekend, we celebrated a milestone for us. On Sunday, April 23rd, was the 1 year anniversary from starting this alcohol-free journey. And so we wanted to do an episode kind of looking back on the 1 year, but also looking forward as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think milestones are important to recognize. I don't really keep track of days so much anymore. I know in the beginning, and everybody's journey is different, of course, but I know in the beginning, I was like, oh, I've been, 2 weeks without alcohol, a month without alcohol. And you kind of, in the back of your mind, you're kind of keeping track. And then, of course, as time goes on, you think less and less about that. And I don't necessarily like to put our journey in terms of days, but I also, again, think it's important to recognize milestones because 1 year, I think, is important, not only to reflect and just kind of see where we've come from, but also to use that as motivation to keep going and look at all the change that has happened and all the good that has happened, but also acknowledge that there's still a past. There's still things that we are still dealing with and healing from that was a years and years in the making. And while 1 year is fantastic, it doesn't just erase what happened in the past. So I think it's important to acknowledge all of that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that was very, very well said and kind of summed up. Because a year seems like an eternity sometimes, depending on what you're doing and what you're focusing on. And sometimes a year seems like no time at all. Like, oh my God, it's already been a year.
Especially like with kids, I think.
Yes,
it just flies by.
Especially with children. But I think this year has been a kind of a juxtaposition of both of those. Like I feel like it's went by really fast, but there were times when it did seem slow too. And I like how you mentioned both like a celebration, but also like there's still a lot of work to do. There's still a lot of things to work through. Because with the newness of this life of being alcohol free, there's a lot of stillness. Like without drinking, there's not the tumultuous nature of, what's going to happen. Are we going to have an argument? What's tomorrow going to look like? Those kinds of things. There's a stillness and a calmness that like your nervous system almost has to get used to. And then once it's used to that, then it's like, oh, now it's time to bring up all of that stuff from the past. Now we can do the stuff from the past. Yeah, exactly. So now it's almost like we've been given enough time, and now like we can truly process what transpired over the years.
Absolutely. So, none of our episodes are scripted. And I think that's a nice thing about our, podcast is these are just conversations. We don't do any editing afterwards as far as taking things out. I mean, we go with what we recorded. Usually we make some sort of outline. This is literally just a conversation. We have no outline. We have nothing. We just wanted
a wing and a prayer.
We just wanted to get on and have conversation. And we laugh about it because sometimes when we get to do our coffee dates, there's a coffee place here where we live that we like to go and we can sit outside and talk. And we always joke that we wish we had microphones out there because I think those would be some of our best episodes because it's just so raw and authentic. And we go all over the place. And I expect this conversation to be the same. We might, start one place and end another. And we appreciate everybody who kind of takes this journey with us for this episode, wherever we may go. But I think I want to start with kind of going back to the reflection, because the first few months, and again, this is the beauty. Everybody's journey is different, right? you and I have taken this journey together, but
Mhm.
yours has looked very different from mine because mine was, I have to stop drinking. And yours was never like that. You could take it or leave it. It wasn't really a big issue for you.
And I think I said that, like, a year prior when we were
Mhm.
out, and I was just like, drinking is fine, but, mm, it's just not, you know.
Right. And I think this podcast, I hope that anybody can relate to it, whether
Mhm.
you are a drinker or not. But I think really the niche is more people who, from the outside world, don't necessarily have like a drinking problem per se. And again, you can define drinking problem in so many different ways. But I think it's the people who, maybe are just questioning their relationship with alcohol and noticing things that they really don't like about their life as a result of alcohol. Um, you know, we talked with Matt and he kind of talked about his rock bottom, and I mentioned, everybody's rock bottom is
Mhm.
going to look different. And I think that there's a kind of a message that like you have to hit rock bottom before you change. And there's a lot of people out there in like the, sober Instagram arena that have repeatedly said, no, you don't have to. Like, just because the world may not see you with the drinking problem doesn't mean you don't have a problem. And I've mentioned that before. Like, I didn't necessarily, from the outside world again, have a drinking problem. But when I looked at my life and all the problems that I had in my life, I could trace it back to one thing, and that was alcohol. So when somebody said, "Well, why do you stop? You don't have a drinking problem." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I do. Because look at all these problems that I have that I would not have if I wasn't drinking alcohol." So again, it's not a black and white. It's a gray. There's so many different scenarios that could play out depending on who you are. But going back to like the first few months of me being alcohol free, I really focused on um, understanding like what my body had gone through with alcohol and like more physical, right? Like
Mhm.
the things that had happened because, going back to sleep, my sleep was wrecked, which, made my days just horrible because I didn't have that, motivation, energy, clarity, all that stuff we've talked about in prior episodes. But I really focused on like what alcohol was doing to me physically, how I could make myself better physically, like what could I do? Can I, get to the gym more? Can I take more walks and things like that? And that was kind of how I got through the first few months. It was that mentality. Listening to a lot of podcasts,
Just gonna
and we
say,
talked about,
lots of
the
Sean
model
Stevenson.
health show, Sean Stevenson, who's he has a few episodes about alcohol, but a lot of his episodes focus on nutrition
Mhm.
because that's what he does. He's a nutrition expert. And that was what I thought I needed at that time. And just recently, and a lot of thanks to a conversation that a couple of conversations you and I had, I've really kind of shifted my focus to kind of like self healing, personal growth, understanding like how my decisions affected others, relationships, and again, podcasts have been a big part of that.
Mhm.
And not that you need to do it only with podcasts.
No.
There's a lot of other things you need to do. I've really never been into meditation, and I've started doing some meditation, which has been very helpful. But that's kind of what I focused on, recently. And it's just kind of cool to see my journey, how, you kind of go from one phase to the next, and
Mhm.
that's all part of the process. You have different phases, and then you can kind of take one from each and kind of, that propels you to moving forward. So um I'll just kind of pause and see if you have any thoughts from there. I've been talking a lot, but
I think that, like, you're totally on the right track there. Because just in my, like, emotional healing journey, I did kind of the same thing. Like, I feel like the physical stuff is our low-hanging fruit. We can see that, like, that's very tangible, right? So if we eat the right things, we can see ourselves losing weight. If we eat the right things, we can see a reduction in inflammation, which causes a reduction in pain. Like, those are the things that we can actually tangibly grasp onto, and what kind of keeps us like moving forward to like, oh, I'm going to sustain this because I can see it. Same thing with like,
yeah, we're a very results driven society,
oh,
aren't we?
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, why do you think, like lose 10 pounds in 10 days, all of that crazy nonsense. But the same thing with like your environment, like reorganizing and being able to physically see the manifestation of your hard work in your environment. Like that's quick. I feel like with emotional work, like you were talking about and transitioning into, that's not something that you are going to see come to fruition quickly.
Right.
Our emotional beings, they take time.
I mean, you've talked about that in your journey and how
Yeah.
long I mean, it's been
Yeah.
years. It's
Yeah.
not something that just happens in a month or two.
It's not, and it's never linear, it's
Yeah.
never like, "Okay, we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna check that box, and then we're gonna do this." It's very, it feels very disorganized while, the body has its own organization system when it comes to, emotional healing, and it will it's self-healing. Like it's going to do what it needs to do in the time that it needs to. Like you just have to be open and available, I guess, to like receive that. And I feel like that's a lot of what you're going through now. To me, like, it's a beautiful process, one, to just watch, to be an observer, because I remember when I was going through it, I thought I was like, I literally thought I was going crazy. I was like, what is happening to me? Like, I can feel things are shifting and changing, and, I have more capacity and things like that. But I didn't have somebody alongside of me being like, yes, you're on the right track. You're doing it. This is all a part of it. Um, I do remember feeling very validated when I found the holistic psychologist on
Mm.
Instagram, and I was like, "Oh my god," like she's talking about the things that I'm going through. This is amazing. Um, but it's really, really cool to see somebody in real time going through those things.
Yeah, I think I posted on Instagram for the 1 year and I said, I kind of have realized over the last year that I control my own destiny and
Mhm.
my own happiness,
Yep.
but it is so, so important to have people around you
Mhm.
that can support you and
Yep.
encourage you, which you have done. And, again, there's no way I could have done this without
Mm.
you. So I appreciate it so much. But also, I have friends and family, we have friends and family that have supported
Mhm.
us and been there for us. And it's so important because I think a lot of people, the struggle for them when they stop drinking is that group around them that maybe was the group that they drank with. And when they stop drinking, those relationships sometimes tend to suffer.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because um, you really need that support at that time. And if you don't have it, it can just make the journey that much harder. So I was so fortunate to have people who, once I stopped drinking, weren't like, oh my gosh, we're not friends anymore. We're never going to hang out again. No, I had friends who were like, hey, that's great.
Mhm.
And we've still been able to hang out, even, in bar settings.
Mhm.
Again, I would not recommend doing that at first. I think you really need to separate yourself in the beginning from those places that you associate with drinking because I think it could be a trigger.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to be different, of course, but eventually, maybe over time, you can go back and hang out with those friends and not drink and still feel comfortable and not feel pressured to drink.
And in
Um,
fact, maybe feel empowered, like whenever you leave
oh
feeling
my
very
gosh,
like in control
yes,
and
thank you for bringing that up. That's been amazing. I think you can attest to how excited I get when I come home from hanging out with some friends and we went to a bar and I come back and I'm just like, God, it feels so good to go out and not drink and still have fun. And you almost feel like I think I've mentioned this before somewhere. Like you almost feel like you've kind of unlocked a secret
Mhm.
that not a lot of people have access to,
Yeah.
which we all have access to, but
Mhm.
when you're out with friends and you see them throughout the night kind of get to those different stages of drinking um and you're just sitting there like I'm having fun and I don't need that to have fun and I am not going to do anything or say anything that I regret because of the alcohol
Will
and then
just be regret of
yeah, I'll just be
your
regret
just
if
own
it's just my
stupidity.
own stupidity, right? And then the next morning, wake up and be like, and I feel great and I can do
Mhm.
whatever I want to do today while
Mhm.
they may not be able to do that. So yeah, that's so empowering.
Mhm.
And just again, going back to the basics, like how do I have fun without alcohol? How do I go out and socialize without alcohol and still have that confidence that I can? Because I
Mhm.
think a lot of people need that liquid courage to be able to talk to people and make conversation and feel confident, which is unfortunate because if you just look deep within yourself, you have that already. You don't need the alcohol to do that. The alcohol is going to make it worse.
Yeah. Well, I think too, like, we're all seeking that deep connection, like having a conversation where you walk away and you're just like, man, that was awesome. That was so awesome. And while I don't know, you drink, you may think that you're having those kinds of conversations. If you do, like, if you have one like that and then you have a deep conversation while you're sober, you can see very much so that those are completely different and you're not making true connection because you may or may not remember that conversation
More than
when
likely
you were
not, depending on
drinking.
how much you drink. Yeah.
And, like, how much sense were you truly making? In the moment, like, you think, like, "I'm the Dalai Lama, I'm just solving all of the world's problems," and, and you look back on it and you're like, "Oh, it's just, like, I couldn't even put,
Yeah,
2 sentences
you're
together
repeating yourself
cohesively."
probably over and over again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
absolutely.
exactly. So, um, in a world where, like, we need deep connection, being alcohol free, it's kind of like one of the first steps because then you can work on yourself and then it kind of is a domino effect because then when you know yourself better you're able to step out into the world with a little more boldness and saying like this is me, this is who I am, I'm okay to be vulnerable and to create a really deep connection with you without feeling like fragile or needing something as a crutch.
And people recognize that,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You know,
They
we
gravitate to it
we
like a
live
moth to a
we
flame.
live in a world where people want to try to tell other people what to do, how to live. But man, it's so simple. It goes back to your actions, right?
Yeah.
Like what do we talk about before when parents or whoever would say like do as I
Do as I
say,
say, not
not
as
as I
I
do.
do.
And
Oh,
we
that's so
have really
cringy.
tried to not take that approach with our children
No.
because you lead by example, right?
Yeah.
Words just kind of go in one ear and out the other a lot of times. But when people see the change in you, and you don't even have to say anything, they can just be around you and see it and feel it and be like, "Wow,
That's
that is
your
not the same
energy. That's
Wesley
your
as a
aura.
couple
That's
years ago, or
your.
yeah, not the same Adam as a couple years ago." I feel like that will change people way more than you sitting and sharing information in your story is certainly inspirational sometimes, but there's just something about seeing that change in people and being like, wow, you know what? Maybe they are on to something. They seem like a different person. They seem in a better place. They
Yeah.
seem happier.
Like more calm, more
Right.
grounded.
Right.
Yeah. The things that we kind of all are looking for, especially in this time of society in our world when things seem very tumultuous and defeating.
hmm
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit, shifting gears. I wanted to talk a little bit about, um, again, going back to those first few months and kind of the temptations, right?
Mm,
So, again, everybody's journey is going to be different. There are a lot of people who the first week, first 2 weeks will ultimately have that drink. They'll give in and have that drink, and that's okay. You can
yeah.
don't beat yourself up. Give yourself grace. We've said this before. Tomorrow's a new day. For me, it wasn't like that. I mean, not to say that I didn't have my temptations and my urges, but there was a part of me that always knew deep down inside when I made that decision to stop, like really made that decision and committed to it. I knew I wasn't going to, and
You knew you weren't going
knew
to.
I wasn't going to drink.
Oh,
Like
okay.
I knew that if I had made that decision and committed to it, that even when those temptations and urges came up, I was going to be able to make it through without,
Hmm.
giving in.
Hmm.
So, and I don't say that to sound cocky or boastful. I just, that was me. I knew that I would be able to do it because again, my journey is different from other people. I wasn't to the point where maybe I was like physically addicted to alcohol per
Right.
se.
Like there was no like codependence of like
Right.
I have to have this to
I didn't have any
function.
withdrawal symptoms because we all know that like certain people cannot just stop drinking.
Yeah.
cold turkey.
Yeah,
That
you're
is
gonna need
that is
somebody to help walk you through
right.
that detox process.
Absolutely. So, that was not my journey. Um, there was a couple times that I really did have some urges to drink, but then for me, I always went back to why are you doing this? What like ultimately why are you doing this? It's to a lot of reasons, but it's to be a better person, to be a better husband, to be a better father. You're doing it for the ones around you. You're doing it for yourself first
Mhm.
and foremost, but you're also doing it for those around you. And so not only do I have to hold myself accountable, but I have other people holding me accountable too. And um, you know, you don't want to let them down, of course, but I don't want to let myself down.
Sure.
Like, so I was able to work through any temptation I had because ultimately I just went back to why are you doing this? And it was so much more worth it to go through this journey and have all these beautiful things happen than to go back to the alcohol. And there we were talking before we started recording, like when was the last time you really like thought, hey, a drink might sound pretty good? And it's been a few months for us,
Mhm.
but there are times where we've been out or whatever, and I'm like, you know what, like that does sound kind of good, but there's never been that like, no, Adam, you can't do it, you can't drink,
You've never had that, like,
like
angel and
that back
devil,
and
like,
forth.
"Oh,
No,
I would
no,
really love to, but I shouldn't. I would really
right.
I
It's
shouldn't."
just been like a fleeting moment,
Mhm.
like, oh, that sounds good, but now. And then I think I told you like now sometimes when I see like bourbon used to be my drink, right?
Mhm.
And now sometimes when I see bourbon, I'm just like I shudder. I'm like, oh, like it's not even
You
a
think of, like, a bourbon hangover
right.
as
It's
you
not even like on my radar anymore to drink. And what's funny is the night before Sunday, so Sunday our 1 year since we started this journey, the night before I had a dream that we were out and I drank. And I woke up, like, with such, like, you know, regret, and I'm like, "Why would you do that?" And it's funny because I was telling you, I'm like, I haven't had a dream like that in quite some time, but
Mhm.
it's almost like subconsciously, I knew the 1 year was coming up, but it's just kind of funny how that all works and,
Like,
how
your subconscious is, like, testing you
right.
as you sleep, like, how would you feel
But it
about
it
this?"
was it was a good reminder
Mhm.
because it, like, almost felt like reality, like, I had
Mm.
let myself down, and I was like, "I don't want that feeling." Like,
Mhm.
I just don't and thankfully, it was just a dream, of course, but I think it is, like, just a little bit of a reminder, again, why you're doing this and to keep you on track.
Yeah. Yeah. The brain is powerful, isn't it?
It is powerful.
Even that subconscious, that's probably more powerful than our conscious brain.
Another thing I wanted to mention going along the lines of drinking and, um, last episode when we were talking to Matt, I asked him a question about moderation, and I think
Mm.
it's worth bringing up because um, there's all this messaging out there like enjoy responsibly, drink responsibly, everything in moderation. And he said that basically based on where you're at in your drinking career, he would say there is no such thing as moderation. Like you have to be 100% committed to not drinking. And I tend to agree with that. Like, because the longer you drink, your moderation is going to look different from when you first started drinking, right? Like
Mhm.
when you first started drinking, one drink can get you pretty buzzed. But, if you've been drinking consistently for 4 or 5 years, that one drink isn't going to do anything.
Mhm.
So your moderation level has now changed. And so my moderation level is going to look different from your moderation level. But it's just again, I think he said it's a slippery slope,
It
and
is.
it because when you're messing with a highly addictive psychoactive drug, which alcohol is,
Mhm.
then how do you moderate something like that? And I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast, but we've definitely talked about it on Instagram. Like, it's almost like saying, like, okay, go ahead and enjoy that cigarette, but in moderation, right? Like, we wouldn't say that. We
Right.
just wouldn't. And, alcohol and cigarettes, addictive wise, are about in the same
Mhm.
category. They're, both very addictive. They're up there with, drugs like cocaine and heroin. Like, I mean, you're talking about something that's very addictive. And how do you moderate that? Like,
Yeah.
you can mess around with it for a while, and some people may be able to moderate their drinking their entire lives. Again, everyone is different, but I feel like a lot of people just won't be able to. And
Mhm.
again, why mess with it? Like, it maybe just speaking personally, why mess with it? That's why I don't think I could ever go back to drinking, because even one drink, like, why? What's the purpose behind that?
Well, I think one, we've done too much research to know that alcohol really it has no benefits at all. None,
Zero benefits.
zero
And
benefits.
the CDC finally came out and said that, because there's been years and years and years of studies that have
Right.
said there are benefits, but if you really look at those studies, they were flawed, because the people who tend to moderate their drinking are the people who tend to
Moderate
moderate everything
everything
in
across
life,
the board.
meaning they moderate the junk food that they eat,
Right.
and they usually exercise, and so they're already living healthier lives than the people who tend to not moderate everything else.
Well, two, everybody's biology is different. So you might have a drink for the first time and you think like, "Oh, this is the bee's knees. I'm really digging this," and somebody else doesn't have that reaction or that thought to it. So for you, moderation is just not in the cards because your biology is already predisposed to being like, I can't just have one. I can't go out and just drink a beer. It's not possible. Um, and then maybe my biology is more of like, okay, you can go out and have one. So if we weren't doing this alcohol free thing, would I be able to moderate my drinking? Absolutely. But for you, it's not. So you have to assess where you are. You got to stop polling, the entire
Right.
world or seeing what this article says or what your best friend does or, what your mom says, because that's not you. Like that's where like the juiciness comes in is when you get to know you and understanding you and what works for you and what does not work for you.
Yeah, great point. We always compare ourselves to other people, right?
Mhm.
Like, well, if so and so can have 2 beers every
I
Friday
yeah.
night, and they don't, have a
It's not
drinking
yeah,
problem,
and it's
then
not messing with their life
right.
and their family is still happy and he's doing all of the things.
But the problem in doing that is, then you have people in my situation. When I told people I was stopping, I wasn't going to drink anymore, a lot of people had that same reaction, like, well, you don't have a problem. And it's like, you don't know the full story. So we may look at that person that has 2 beers on Friday night and think, oh, they're fine. And they're not fine.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, again, you can't compare yourself to others because you don't know their story. You
Right.
don't know their journey.
You see the perception that they're projecting out into the world, right? It's like social media, right?
Yeah.
Like your feed
It's a
looks really
fantasy. Yeah.
great, but if you came into their world, you would be like, you're a bit of a hot mess. And I didn't realize that, your Instagram feed looks like it's, just totally perfect and
Yeah.
wonderful.
It's all the highlights. Nobody's
It is. It's all the
nobody's gonna
highlights.
post that, the things that they don't want other people to
Right.
see, right?
Yeah, that epic fight you got into with your partner or, the fact that you feel alone or sad or depressed most days or yeah,
Yeah.
people aren't going to post that for the most part.
It's just like pictures, like,
Yeah.
yeah, everybody's smiling in the picture, but, like,
10 minutes
before
before.
everybody's arguing and in a bad
Right.
mood, yeah, but you
Exactly.
capture that one moment, and that's what you post on Instagram, and everybody's like, "Oh, look at them, they're having such a good time," and that you don't know that.
After the picture's over too, like the argument ensues again, like
Yeah,
just it pauses for that brief moment to capture that one smile. Yeah.
yeah,
Very interesting.
and I apologize, our dog is barking in the background, so if you can hear that, hey, that's what happens when you
This is
do
real
podcasts
time.
just raw and unedited. You get all,
Mhm.
we're doing this in our home. We don't have a studio, so we have to deal with all the elements, but so anyways, going back to alcohol-free journey, another thing I wanted to mention is, again, kind of going back to the healing process, right? And um, I've really tried to understand all the hurt and the pain that was caused by my drinking
Mhm.
over the course of years and years, because again, this last year has been great, but it doesn't just magically erase everything that happened in the past. And while I don't want to dwell in the past, I
Mhm.
certainly have to heal from those things, right? And everybody heals in their own time. There's no timetable on it. Like, just because we've been a year alcohol free doesn't mean that we've healed from everything that happened before. Um,
If anything, you kind of just scratch the surface.
right. But I was wondering if you don't mind sharing just a little bit about kind of your point of view, because I have, obviously my point of view, and I'm looking at like, oh my gosh, this has been great and things are so much better, and they
Mhm,
are.
mhm,
But also, you had to deal with so much that I never understood at the time, or probably even took the time to try to understand.
mhm.
Wasn't in a place where I could understand. So just wanted to kind of get your point of view, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, so people can kind of see the opposite side of it. Because I think there's so many people that I don't want to generalize, but I think there's a lot of couples out there where the man goes out and drinks and thinks that everything's fine. And maybe even his wife says everything's fine, but deep down inside, things are not fine.
Mhm. Um, I'm glad that you acknowledge that, and we're starting to heal and move forward, and you're open to discussing and exploring things that have happened in the past. Um, but yeah, I think the partner tends to get just kind of sideswept. And when the person stops drinking, they kind of get the glory, right? Like, oh,
Absolutely.
did
Yeah.
you see Adam's alcohol free now? And things are so much better and life is so great. And um, I think I kind of had mixed emotions whenever our 1 year came up, because you were in a very celebratory, like, look what we've done and this is so wonderful and things have been so much better. And I was in more of a yes. However, there's a lot of things in the past that have happened that I never spoke up for myself and told you how much hurt and pain came from the nights when I was like, when is he gonna get home? Or what is tomorrow gonna look like? Or I'm gonna have to have another conversation with the kids, or, like things like that. Um, so it was a lot of, I think I just more so wanted like validation that, hey, like I really did some things that I shouldn't have. And not that anybody, I don't need an apology. I don't need anything of that. But um I'm a very sensitive, emotional person and an empath. So you married me. And maybe those are some like really great qualities that you unconsciously saw about me. Um but while that is all true, I also tend to try and make everything better. I found myself, even in the midst of your drinking, when people would bring stuff up to me,
You would defend
I
me.
would
Yeah.
defend you. I would be like, yes, but he is still like, he's a great dad with the
And
kids. And
and I defended
he,
myself when you
oh,
brought that up.
oh, for sure. Yeah, you defended yourself. Um,
It's
but
always our first reaction. Like if someone's bringing up things about us that we don't like,
oh, yeah.
but look at all the other things that I can do instead of saying like you're right. There's things that I
Um,
need to work on.
Or like you compare yourself to somebody else. Yes, but I'm still working full time. I'm still providing. We have a roof over our head.
Hmm.
I play with the children
It's
or
because we've talked about this. Like when you would bring those things up, I would get flooded. Like
oh yeah.
I wouldn't know, I wouldn't even know what direction to go in,
Mhm.
and so I would just completely shut down,
Mhm.
and I would either have my defenses up,
Yeah.
or I would just my body language would just be that of I don't want to hear this. I
Mhm.
don't want to talk about this,
Mhm.
and I was subconsciously doing it. Um,
And even at the time when we would, I remember, we literally had the same conversation for
it was
years.
Groundhog's Day.
Years. Yeah. And I was just like, during those conversations, it's like, I don't know how much more clear I can make what I'm trying to say. And for me, that was huge. Me standing up for myself, saying, like, I don't like what you're doing. And this is how it's causing pain and strife in our family. That was huge. huge at the time because there were years when I never said anything at
Mhm.
all. I think it was, um it's interesting how, like, those visceral moments, like, stay in your mind forever, but it was, like, around Christmas Eve of 2019, and was the first time like, really remember telling you how much I needed, um not even it wasn't even like alcohol. I mean, it was because of alcohol because you were hungover that day, but it was more so of like, I requested something of you and you blatantly just went out and did the opposite of what I requested. And I just felt like so hurt. And at that time, all year long, I had been doing so much work on myself and I had come so far. And I was so pumped for that year. Like 2019 was just my year, and I loved so many things about it. And then for it to end on just such a, I don't know, kind of stinky note. I was just so, I was just so frustrated, but I was really also proud of myself for standing up for myself because that was one of the first times that I had. But then it felt like from 2019 until,
22.
22,
Yeah.
like we literally had the same argument over and over and over
Yeah.
again. But anyways,
Well, I wanna before we move on, I wanna from, maybe, like, the guy's point of view,
mhm,
I want anybody who's out there who's in a similar situation where you're going out and your wife does bring it up, our first reaction is to get mad and
mhm,
defend ourselves. And that is not the right approach. Like, I would encourage you, first of all, take a breath. Don't say anything. Just try to take it in, try to understand it from their point of view. And if you are not ready to talk without getting upset, tell them, I appreciate you bringing this up. Give me some time to process it and let's have another conversation when I'm ready. Because when you just react out of emotion, chances are it's not going to be a good reaction.
n not at
And
all.
just try to put yourself in your partner's situation. I know for me, when you would be out late once in a blue moon, and I would wake up maybe like, 12, 1 o'clock, and you weren't home, that instant panic, right? Like, oh, I hope they're okay. I hope something didn't happen. And, and I knew that you weren't out, getting crazy or anything like that. It wasn't even that. It was more so just, I hope she makes it home safe.
Mhm,
And for, you to be in the situation where I'm out and drinking probably heavily and it's 1, 2 in the morning and I'm still not home, like that has to be amplified times 10. So, put yourself in your spouse's situation. Like they're just ultimately they're worried. They're
mhm,
concerned. They love you and they want what's best for you and they want you to be safe. That it's coming out of a place of love and concern. It's not coming out of a place of, you're a terrible person and I'm
no.
so mad at you for, this. Like there's going to be anger, sure, but just try to understand and be sympathetic that ultimately they want you to be happy.
Mhm.
They want you to be happy.
And at the end of the day, all I wanted I feel like we've always had, like, a fairly good marriage, like, we're not we don't scream at each other and
No.
fight like that, that's just not who we are, but I wanted a deep connection,
Hmm.
and I wasn't able to do that because, I didn't trust you. Flat out, I just didn't trust you. Because so many times you had went back on your word of, "No, I'm not. I won't. I
Hmm.
promise I won't drink too much." And then
And that's where it goes
it's
back to the moderation because I would go into the night thinking, "Oh, I'm only gonna have a few," and it didn't work. So,
yeah,
that moderation just was not an option because we've talked about how alcohol changes your brain and how quickly it
sure.
gets into your bloodstream and all, it means you
Oh,
make decisions that you would never make because your judgment is, being affected. So, like
um, but also too, like, if we're talking a heteronormative relationship, typically the female tends to be, the I don't know. I shouldn't stereotype because that's just kind of adding to what we don't want culture to fall into the trap of. But um, you know, women tend to be just more soft and emotional, and I think that a lot of women just want um they want that emotional closeness from their partner, their husband, and I just don't know if you can have that and have somebody um that is consuming, over consuming on a regular basis, because
Because you don't get to know the
you
real
don't get to know
person.
the real person.
Yeah.
You don't. It's always like I don't know. Yeah, for a long time it felt like it was very surface level. Like we
Mhm.
were just kind of like,
And
this is life. This is what we created.
and it's only until I stopped drinking and had that perspective
Mhm.
that I could truly see that.
Mhm.
I don't know that I ever could have seen it when I was still drinking because that wasn't me. Like
Mhm.
I was
And I think that's
living
what
as a
was
different person
so
almost, right?
frustrating too, is like I could see so many good things in you. I could see like all of this potential, all of this just ability to accomplish. And I was just like, man, he's underselling himself. Um you know, he's just not living up to his potential. And that sounds so like cliche and eye roll. But that's what it was. Like I saw so many like good and amazing things in you. But then on the flip side of that, being continuously hurt over and over and over again, um, you almost like there's a war going on inside of you of like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, I love this person so much and I want them to accomplish and I want them to, and then it's like, no, but they've hurt me so much and you've got to keep your guard up because what if that happens again? You don't want to be hurt too much again, you know, like you're constantly
Yeah.
you're constantly warring with yourself as you're looking at them, and it's so bizarre. But also too, like I wanted to be the doting wife. Like I wanted to be like, yeah, like he's my husband and he's
Of
awesome
course,
and
you
we
wanna
do
be
that.
proud of that, right? You don't wanna be like, "Oh my
Exactly.
god, he's an embarrassment," you know?
Yeah. And that was always, yeah, that was, you know, really difficult.
I mean, and, me drinking still, I was numb to a lot of that, right?
Mhm.
You can't
No.
feel your feelings.
No.
Alcohol numbs you to those
Yes.
feelings, and that's why a lot of people drink alcohol, but I
I'm a testament to
yeah.
that. That was my sole purpose in drinking. Like I wanted to numb the emotions.
Mhm. But also I wanna say that, um, just because you stop drinking alcohol does not mean that all of a sudden you're just gonna be this new person, right? Like, there is so much work that
Oh,
has to go into it.
absolutely.
Stopping alcohol is the first step,
Mhm.
but then afterwards, you have a long journey ahead
Mhm.
of you. Of course, depending on how much hurt you've caused in the
Mhm.
past and how much you drank and, things like that. But it's not easy. Like,
Mm-mm.
I post a lot of things online about how great life is without alcohol, but I also feel like I try to keep it real. Like, hey, it's only great because I'm making it great.
Mhm.
I'm putting in the work, and there's still a lot more to do.
Mhm.
I'm nowhere near. It's a never ending journey, life in general, but the alcohol free journey as well. It's never going to be complete, right? We're never going to accomplish what the ultimate goal. Like, there's always more to do. um
Well, because
y-
that's always a part of your story, right? Like alcohol and overconsumption is always going to be a part of
mhm,
your story. So it's always going to be um like a tab, you know,
mhm,
that's still, it's not open, but you know, it's there. It's a part of you.
yeah.
Instead of a tab open, it's a file
It's
in
yeah.
your modem
I
computer.
feel like I have, like, some people when they share their screen and they have, like, 50 Google tabs open.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, I have like 1,000 open,
Oh
and like
yeah.
like, I need to close some of these tabs because it's starting to overload the
Yeah.
system. So,
Yeah, exactly. My nervous system is shot.
but yeah, it's so much work that is so incredibly worth it. You
It
never get
is.
the things
It
you
is.
want without hard work. Like, you're not
Mhm.
gonna get it handed to you, and if you do, it's just not gonna mean as much to you
Mhm.
because you gotta put in that work, and that's how you grow and learn, and we've talked about that, the journey, and you can't just fast forward through
No.
things, and but also, again, to quote another cliche, you really do have to take it a day at a time.
Yeah.
Like, you can't look too far ahead because it's becomes overwhelming. Um, I always hate that in sports when they interview or like, "Oh, we're just taking it a game at a time." But that what they're saying is they're only focusing on the present because that's all you really can do. You can't control what happens tomorrow or the
No.
next day, but you can control what happens today.
And if you start looking ahead, like there's so much like anxiety inducing thoughts that pop up, or like, well, what would I do if this situation, or what am I going to do about that situation? It's just like, no, yeah, stay in the present, stay focused. And then when something pops up, you're going to deal with that when it's time.
What's one thing you kind of enjoy now that we didn't have, a year, 2 years, 3 years ago? Like, is there anything that just kind of pops up? You're like, man, that's just it's so life is so much better because of this.
Weekends.
Weekends, yeah.
Weekends are so much better. To be honest with you, I really disliked weekends because I was just waiting on Fridays to get a text of like, oh, so and so wants to go out.
Hmm.
Do you mind? And well, this is our weekend. Here we are. So now I love I love when I come home because you're already home. When I come home and you're like, there's a new Dateline on. Like,
Oh, that
you
just
know,
aged us. Oh,
like,
but
you
there's
know,
something beautiful about that, right? The fact that we can get excited about spending a night, Friday night at
hmm
home, or like just getting so excited about like going out and having, dinner together as a
yeah,
family and then being home by like 7 o'clock. Not
yeah,
that I still don't enjoy going out with our friends every once in a
absolutely,
while,
I
but
do.
yeah, I don't want to say I've become a homebody. I mean, I think we all have become a homebody since
Post
COVID, but
COVID.
there's just you can find joy in the little things.
hmm
Whereas when I drink, I always thought I had to be looking for the
Like
next
party,
event,
good
the next
time.
I had to be out with a bunch of people socializing in order to enjoy my weekend.
Yeah.
There's that kind of association with that. Like we have to go out on Friday or Saturday
Or
and
like when your coworkers ask you like, "Oh, what'd you do
well,
this
yeah,
weekend?"
we
And
watched a Dateline.
right? Like, have like some, epic story of, what happened. Yeah, it's just like, "Oh, we
But
did."
that's one of the things I really love about being alcohol free is just finding joy in the little
Mm,
things, the simplistic things.
absolutely.
You appreciate everything so much more when you're not hungover,
Oh yeah,
when you're thinking clearly,
for sure.
when you're not embarrassed from something you did the night before, when you didn't just have an argument with your wife for the thousandth time about you going out and drinking too much. You have the ability to appreciate and enjoy all the little things in life. And I
Mhm.
think that's one of the most beautiful things about being alcohol free.
Well, if you too, like, just take into account the short amount of time that we have on this planet. Like, even if you live to be 90, like, that's only 90 years. That's not a very long time. And there's so much to do. There's so much to see. There's so much to experience. There's so many books to read, like so many amazing stories to hear. Like, why are we going to waste our time putting more toxic chemicals into us whenever we're already inundated with all the glyphosate that we could possibly handle? Like, it doesn't make sense. And we're just buying into the story that society is telling us that we have to do X in order to be, cool or have fun or, be an adult or
Yeah.
whatever. We're just like, just
We
drinking the social Kool-Aid, and
we've said
it's
multiple times, like when you work all week, why would you want to spend your precious weekend not feeling good?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
my routine was work throughout the week, usually, go out on Friday, be pretty much down for the count Saturday, and then try to rush to get everything done on Sunday that I couldn't get done on Saturday. And then
And
you start
possibly still not
and
feeling your
possibly not feel the
best on
best
Sunday.
and then start the week over on Monday.
Mhm.
That's not a great way to live. Like, why would
Not
you
at
want to
all.
waste and also throughout the week, like we've talked about before, I wasn't fully present
Mhm.
on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because I was thinking about when are you going to drink this week? Maybe we'll have a drink on Thursday night, or maybe actually even have a drink on Wednesday night. Is there
The
a
game
game on?
on.
Maybe I can. Yeah, be my excuse to go and watch. You go downstairs and watch a game and have a glass of bourbon, and Well, when you're living like that, you can't enjoy the moment you're in. You just want to fast forward it and get to the wait when Thursday night or the weekend or whatever, and you can't just enjoy the present.
Yep, absolutely. The just you saying that about, like, going downstairs and having a drink, like, I never realized how much, you did, like, isolate yourself, because going downstairs, like, the kids wouldn't come downstairs, they would stay upstairs with me,
Hmm.
and, yeah, like, you would isolate yourself and to not that, if I didn't come down, you wouldn't be like, "No, go back upstairs," or
Yeah,
anything
sure,
like that,
sure.
but, there was a sense of, like, us and you
Hmm.
for a bit.
And now, I mean, I rarely go
I
downstairs anymore
know,
by myself, but
yeah.
even if I do, like, I invite you guys to come with me.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's that's just a weird little thing that you don't really even think about,
You
but you
don't.
looking back, you're like, "Wow, yeah." And I think I've told you, like, that was my time to like, especially when I couldn't go out,
Yeah.
that was my time to socialize because 'cause I'd go downstairs, put the game on, but then I'd be texting with friends or, my brothers or
Yeah.
whatever, and like, "Oh, what are you sipping on?" "I'm sipping on this," and, like,
Mhm.
that was my socialization.
That was like COVID,
Yeah, that was
kinda
COVID. Yeah,
started in
exactly.
COVID when we couldn't go out, and then it just kind of snowballed
But you
from
don't
there.
realize that, yeah, that I was isolating myself
Uh-huh.
from you guys, and
Yeah.
there's something so nice about, like, yeah, again, a Friday night, we're all just, together and enjoying each other's company, and I'm not worried
Forcing
about
the kids to play games with us while they fuss about it.
exploding kittens. Y'all should try. My sister and her husband got us on the game Exploding Kittens, which is so much fun.
Is.
Recommend it for anybody out there. It's a good family game too because our kids are young and they can
Yeah.
still play it, and
Yeah.
it's really easy to learn.
For the most part, yeah, yeah,
But
but it it's it's so much better, like, it makes my heart so much more full whenever we're all together. There's, like, a feeling of safety, I don't have to worry about, yeah, like, when you're coming home or what time it's going to be or
and one more thing, kind of to close out, that I've thought about over the last year, not drinking. Um, it's just being so thankful and not trying to look back at like, oh my gosh, you wasted so many years, but just being
mm-mm,
thankful that I realized when I did that I needed to change
mhm,
because our kids are still young enough to where, I, I, I haven't missed them growing up, you know? And I think about like what, it's people who continue their drinking until their kids are older. And if they ever look back and think, wow, like I wish I wouldn't have drank while my kids were young because I just feel like I wasn't present with them, or I feel like I missed out on so much, or I feel like I was a bad example for them. And like, I, I'm just so thankful that I don't have to look back with any regret. Of
mhm.
course, there will be decisions that I make that I'll probably regret. Like, just because I don't drink doesn't mean I'm going to be the perfect parent and I'm going to always be happy with the choices I make,
Not
and
at all.
that I don't still sometimes bury myself in my phone or things, which I'm always constantly working on. We're all working on,
Yeah,
but alcohol is not going to be an excuse for the things I wish I didn't do.
yeah, yeah,
And I think that's just so amazing because I realized it now when they're still 7 and 5 and not, 27 and 25.
yeah, and with everything that you have been through, um, hopefully you can impart some wisdom whenever they get older of like, "Hey, here's my journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm just gonna tell you, you know, what's happened
I,
here, and I'm gonna allow you to make the decisions that you want to.
mhm.
But this is me.
I love that you said that because that's how I feel on this podcast. And when I post on Instagram, this is my journey. This is what I
Yeah,
have been through, and this is what I've learned.
this is not
Ultimately,
yours.
ultimately, this is up to you. This is not me condemning you or judging you
No,
for
never,
anything you've
never.
done. This is with love and compassion because
Mm-hmm.
I
Always,
know
always.
what I went through, and I don't want other people to have to
Mm-hmm.
go through that
Mm-hmm.
and put their loved ones through what I put my
Mm-hmm.
loved ones through. And so, again, even if just one person, we don't have a big following, and that's okay. It doesn't matter if we have one follower or a million followers. If
Yeah.
that one person, can take anything from our journey and
Oh,
apply that to their life to make it a little better, man,
totally worth it.
that's what it's all about, isn't
Totally
it?
worth it.
Yeah.
That's the imprint, like from human to human that you're here to make. That's the whole purpose, right? We're here to support one another. We're here to love one another. We're here to like, hey, I've been there. I'm 365 days out. Like, let me, put my hand down and help pull you
Yeah.
out, and
And then
we'll do this
there's
together.
people that have been, alcohol free for 10 years
Yeah.
that can impart that wisdom on me because I'm still
Yeah.
a baby when it comes to this.
Right.
And so
Right.
one person affects another,
Yeah.
affects another. And that's what's going to make this world a better place.
Yep. I agree.
Sounds a little pie in the sky, but
No, it doesn't have to be.
no, it
It
doesn't.
does not have to be.
So I think that's it for this episode. Les, thanks so much for the conversation.
Always.
I hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you guys for taking this journey with us. All the support and encouragement that we get from our listeners, we really appreciate it. Share this with a friend. Leave a comment, subscribe. We just are so thankful that you guys take the time to listen.
Yeah,
To two normal everyday folks that really just are trying to do our best in life. I hope like everyone else is, but if there's anything that you can take away from what we've talked about, that's what we're trying to do here. So thank you all so much for listening. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week.
See you later.